They put a price tag on her chest like she was a dead animal carcass. $18 and a shot of bourbon. And not a single man blinked. Eliza didn't scream anymore. She'd lost her voice the night her stepfather shoved her into the back of a mule cart and told her, "Smile, girl. Men pay more for pretty things." She wasn't a girl now. She was merchandise. The auctioneer didn't say her name, just tapped her bruised shoulder and called her Lot Hash 4. Her bare feet stood on a rotting crate, her dress torn at the collar where one of the drunk bidders had inspected the goods. The sun burned above, merciless as the eyes below. One man spit and shouted, "I'll breed her myself. She looks strong enough." Another said, "She'll last longer than the last one. Just feed her right." Somewhere, a woman laughed. Eliza's lips didn't tremble. Her soul had curled up and died a week ago when her mother's grave was dug with her own hands. But then something shifted. Not in the wind, not in the sky, in the crowd. A ripple moved like the earth flinched. Boots shuffled. Jokes died. Silence landed like a predator. And then he appeared. Not on a horse, not with noise, just a shape. Bare chest, leather-wrapped arms, war paint smeared across cheekbones, a hawk feather braided into black hair. His stare didn't flinch. Not once. He saw everything. Her swollen eye, her cracked lip, the blood on her ankle. And then, like thunder before lightning, he spoke. "Take the rope off her, now." The auctioneer blinked. "Sir, this is illegal. She is not livestock," the man said, stepping forward. "She is sacred. You treat her like meat. I treat you like a curse." A man beside him laughed and reached for a rifle. That was a mistake. In one motion, the stranger shattered his nose with the hilt of a blade carved from buffalo bone. No one moved after that. No one breathed. The Lakota warrior looked back at the stage, at Eliza. "You can come down, or I'll carry you." Her knees said no, but her heart screamed yes. She took one step, then another. Her leg buckled, but he caught her, held her, not like a savior, but like someone who remembered what it meant to be human. Around them, the crowd stared, silent, too stunned to stop what was happening. The auction was over, but the war had just begun. Because Eliza May Turner had just been stolen back from hell. And the man who did it? His name was Chayton, which meant falcon. But that day, he was the storm. And nothing. Not the town, not the sheriff, not the whispers of men who hated his blood, would be the same again. They chased them like hounds let loose after a fresh kill. Chayton didn't run. He moved like the earth bent for him, like the forest bowed to make way. Eliza, half carried, half dragged, clung to his shoulder, still dazed, still bleeding. Behind them, the town roared like a kicked hornet's nest, men loading rifles, saddling horses, barking threats into the wind. "Bring her back or we hang the both of you," someone screamed. But Chayton didn't look back. His hand gripped her waist with the quiet strength of someone who had survived worse storms. When they reached the tree line, he dropped low, eyes scanning every movement like a hawk mid-hunt. "You walk or you die," he said. Not unkind, just honest. Eliza nodded. She didn't know who she was anymore. Victim, fugitive, or something not yet named. But she knew this man wasn't like any she'd ever met. He didn't touch her like she was fragile. He didn't look at her like she was broken. He looked at her like she mattered, and it scared her more than the rifles behind them. They trekked through twisted brush, mud sucking at her bare feet, blood still trickling down her leg. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was holy. Every step further from that auction block felt like tearing skin from bone, leaving behind the girl they tried to sell. "Why did you stop them?" she whispered finally. He didn't slow, because they forgot she was a person. She? You, me, my mother, my sister. Any woman they think they can own. His voice wasn't angry. It was ancient, like it had been burning in his blood for generations. They reached a shallow creek where he knelt and scooped water into a leather pouch, offering it without a word. She drank like a dying thing, and when she finished, He dipped a cloth and wiped the dirt from her neck, her shoulder, her split lip. No permission asked, no apology given. Just care. Just purpose. Suddenly she flinched. "You'll get killed for this?" "Maybe," he said, tying a strip of buckskin around her wrist to stop the bleeding. "But you'd already died back there. I saw it in your eyes." She stared at him like he was insane, or a ghost. "Do you even know me?" "No," he said, "but I know what men like them do, and I know what silence becomes." Then came the gunshot. Loud, close. Wood splintered near her head as a bullet chewed into a tree trunk. Eliza dropped. Chayton didn't. He turned with the precision of a storm and fired one arrow. Just one. A scream followed, then silence. "One down," he muttered. "More coming." They ran again, this time faster, wilder. The forest grew darker as the sun dipped and Eliza's legs gave out. Chayton caught her again. She sobbed into his chest, hating herself for needing him, loving him for not letting go. "We won't make it," she whispered. "We will," he said, "because you're not going back. They'll hang you. Then let the tree hold a man who remembered his mother's blood." She looked up at him, a lump in her throat. "What are you?" He stared back, jaw tight, eyes burning. "The one thing they don't expect." And with that, he lifted her again and disappeared into the dark, while the world behind them prepared to hunt, to punish, to erase. But they had already made one fatal mistake. They touched the wrong girl, and they underestimated a Lakota who still remembered what it meant to fight for the sacred. By morning, her feet were bleeding through the cloth he'd wrapped them in. Chayton hadn't slept, not for a second. He crouched near the edge of a granite outcrop, watching smoke rise in the distance. 4 columns, wide apart. "They've split into hunting lines," he said quietly. "They want to box us in." Eliza sat with her back against a pine tree, clutching a rough blanket he'd handed her hours ago. It smelled like horsehair and cedar, and it was the warmest thing she'd known in weeks. "How far until we're safe?" she asked. He didn't answer right away, just traced a shape in the dirt with a twig. An arrow, pointed east. "Safe isn't a place, it's a time. And it's not now." She looked down at her hands, filthy, shaking, with dried blood under her fingernails. "Why are they trying so hard to get me back?" she asked, voice breaking. "I'm not worth anything." Chayton turned. His stare was sharper than the blade on his hip. "You're proof that they can be beaten, that a man can say no." The silence between them thickened. Then a voice shouted from far off, too far to see but close enough to freeze her breath. "We know you're out there, Redskin. Hand her over and we'll let you walk." Chayton stood, slow and tall. "They lie," he muttered. "They always lie." Eliza gripped the blanket tighter. "What if they find us?" He looked down at her. "Then we make them wish they didn't." Hours passed. They moved again, deeper into ravines where the rocks swallowed their tracks and the sky narrowed to slivers. Eliza stumbled often. She never asked to stop. Not once, because something strange was happening. With every step away from that auction block, her spine straightened, her eyes steadied, and the fire in her gut that had been trampled and pissed on by the world began to flicker. Not much, but enough to breathe again. "Who taught you to fight like that?" she asked. "My grandmother," Chayton said without looking back. "She stabbed a U.S. soldier with a knitting needle when they tried to drag her son away. That son was my father. We don't run from monsters. We make them bleed." Eliza didn't respond. She just walked faster. By nightfall, they reached an abandoned cabin half sunk into a hill. "We stay here tonight," he said. "We'll move before dawn." Inside was dust, spiders, and silence. Chayton started a small fire and laid 2 blankets near opposite corners of the room. Eliza sat by the flame, hands open to the warmth. Then, for the first time since she met him, she asked him something without fear. "What would you have done if I didn't want to leave?" He turned slowly. "Then I'd have left alone. You wouldn't have forced me?" "Freedom isn't forced," he said. "That's just another kind of chain." Her throat clenched. All her life, men had grabbed, taken, claimed. And here was one who had bled for her, and would have let her walk away if she asked. That night she didn't cry, not even once, because something in her chest had shifted, something unfamiliar. Not love, not yet, but something like the memory of dignity, like a scar remembering how the skin once felt before the burn. Outside, wolves howled. Somewhere beyond, the men who paid to buy her circled like vultures, but she lay down, staring at the wooden ceiling, and whispered to herself a name she'd never forget. Chayton, the one who didn't look at her like a livestock, the one who didn't ask to be thanked, the one who stood when everyone else kept sitting. The storm had come, and she was no longer its victim. At dawn, a noose hung from the edge of the trading post gate, empty, swaying, waiting. Sheriff Bill Hargrove pulled his coat tight and lit a cigar with shaking fingers. "He made us look weak," he muttered, "in front of every rancher, trader, and two-bit outlaw for 20 miles. Beside him, Mr. Talcott spit into the dust. "He didn't just take a girl, he took my property." Hargrove exhaled smoke through his nose. "He took your mistake and made it a war." Across town, the search party regrouped, half drunk, half scared, all angry. Men who'd never risked their lives for anything were now loading rifles because their pride had been wounded deeper than their skin. "Find the red bastard," Hargrove said. "And when you do, hang him from this post while she watches." But while they planned vengeance, miles away, Eliza stood in front of a river, staring at her reflection. For the first time in weeks, she didn't see a girl covered in dirt and shame. She saw a fighter, shaky, bruised, uncertain, but alive. Chayton stood nearby, watching the tree line. "You ever kill someone?" she asked suddenly. His eyes didn't move. "Yes." "Because they tried to hurt you?" "No," he said. "Because they succeeded." She didn't ask more. There were stories behind his eyes, and she knew not all stories needed telling. As they crossed the river, her legs gave out again. "I can't," she said, collapsing. He didn't scold, didn't question, just lifted her like a brother would carry his wounded sister. "Then I can," he said. They found shelter that night in a cave used long ago by buffalo hunters. The walls held carvings, spirals, handprints, the faint outline of a hawk in flight. "Your people made these?" she asked. "Some of them," he said. "Some were here long before we came. This land remembers more than the men who claim to own it." Eliza traced a handprint with her finger. "What if they catch us tomorrow? Then we fight. And if we lose," he didn't hesitate, "then we lose free." Later, as the fire crackled, she asked what she had been afraid to ask since the first moment he stopped that auction. "Why me? You could have walked past, said nothing, done nothing, let me rot." Chayton turned to her slowly. His voice wasn't loud, but it buried itself in her bones. "Because once, when I was 10, I watched my sister taken. My father held me back while 3 men dragged her away. He said, 'If we fight, we die.' So we lived. And she didn't. I've waited every day since to undo that silence." Eliza felt the words punch into her chest. Not pity, not grief, something bigger, shared fury. A wound so old it grew roots in another's soul. "She would have wanted you to save someone," Eliza whispered. Chayton nodded once. "I think that's why I saw you. Because you were the one." She crawled to sit closer to the fire, knees pulled to her chest. "And what if I'm not worth it?" "You already were," he said, "even when you thought you weren't." Outside, coyotes howled and the trees bent in the wind. But inside the cave, Eliza Turner felt something she had forgotten the shape of. Hope. Not the fairy tale kind. The kind made of scars and stolen chances. And beside her, Chayton sharpened his blade. Not to hunt, not to conquer, but to protect the last piece of truth he could still believe in. Her. They found the first body at sunrise, face down in the river, one boot missing, the back of his skull crushed with a rock. Sheriff Hargrove stared down at the corpse of his deputy and said nothing for a full minute. Then he lit another cigar, flicked the match into the water, and growled, "They want war. I'll give them a massacre." 20 men rode out before noon, all armed, all white, all angry. Meanwhile, Eliza woke up with a jolt, breath caught in her throat, unsure if the scream that had woken her was real or just a leftover echo from her nightmares. Chayton sat cross-legged outside the cave, eyes closed, listening. Not resting, not praying. Listening like he could hear the trees speak. "They're coming," he said before she even spoke. "Closer now. I counted 3 horses last night. I'll count 30 before sundown." Eliza pulled the blanket tighter. "How do we survive 30 men?" He opened his eyes. "We don't. We disappear before they get here." He didn't smile. He didn't offer comfort. He just stood up and handed her a bundle of herbs and bark. "Chew this. It'll numb the pain. We move fast." Her legs ached like fire had been poured into the muscle. But she nodded, shoved the bitter root into her mouth, and followed him. Every branch they ducked under, every stream they crossed, she wondered if this was how hunted animals felt, knowing the world wanted them gone, not because of what they'd done, but because they dared to escape. By noon, they reached the edge of an open valley. A hawk circled above. Chayton froze. "This place is wrong," he whispered. "Too quiet." That's when the first shot came, not from the ridge, from behind. One of the bullets tore through Chayton's shoulder, clean but deep. Eliza screamed as he staggered. He turned, raised his bow, and let an arrow fly without looking. A man screamed. "Down the ravine!" he shouted, grabbing her wrist. They ran, rocks flying, dirt exploding around them. Eliza's feet skidded out from under her and she tumbled hard, scraping her arms. He yanked her up. "You okay?" "I don't know," she gasped. "Then keep running." At the bottom of the ravine, the air was cooler, but the echo of hooves thundered above like giants hunting mice. Chayton leaned against a boulder, clutching his bleeding arm. Eliza knelt beside him, ripping a piece of her dress to press against the wound. "You're gonna pass out," she said, voice cracking. "Not yet," he hissed. "They won't come down here, not without dogs." "What do we do?" "We disappear," he repeated. Then he looked at her, bleeding, exhausted, dirt smeared, and he smiled. "You're still here." "I am," she whispered. "I thought I'd be dead by now." "You were," he said. "Now you're not." And for the first time, Eliza realized he wasn't just fighting to save her life. He was fighting to return her soul. Her breath caught. "You need to rest." "There's no rest in war," he said. "Only victory or graves." She gripped his hand. "Then let's win." His eyes flickered. "We will. But first, you need to become something they can't catch." "What's that?" He leaned closer. "The fire they thought they put out." Then he stood, blood dripping from his sleeve, and whispered something in Lakota to the wind. A prayer? A warning? She didn't know, but she felt it. Something had changed. The hunted had stopped running, and the wolves chasing them were about to learn what it meant to corner a spirit that refused to die. That night, Eliza lit the fire. Not because she wasn't scared. They were both scared. But fear had stopped controlling her. Chayton's arm was wrapped in crushed moss and bark, soaked in blood. His skin pale, but his eyes still burning like coals under wind. "You should have left me," he said through clenched teeth. She didn't even glance up. "So you could bleed alone and die while I rot in a cage again." She fed more dry wood to the flame. "I'd rather go down beside the only man who didn't see me as something to own." He smirked weakly. "You talk like a warrior. I learned from one." They were hiding in a collapsed root cellar, walls of stone and timber holding back the weight of a forgotten mountain cabin. Outside, thunder rolled low. The riders were still searching, lanterns flickering across the ridges like distant curses. Eliza pressed her ear to the soil. "They're nearby," she said. 5, maybe 6 horses." Chayton's head nodded. "Talcott won't rest until he drags me back in chains. He wants me on my knees." "What does he want from me?" "To erase the insult." Eliza stared at him. "What insult?" "That a girl refused to be sold, and a savage refused to ask permission." She looked down at her trembling hands. I'm tired of being prey. Then stop acting like one. He struggled to sit, breathing hard. You want to survive, Eliza. Then the girl who cried is gone. You walk out of this hole as something new. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just reached for the bone-handled knife he kept beside him and held it firm. Teach me. He stared at her for a long second, then slowly nodded. You sure? No, she said, but I'm done being unsure. For the next 2 hours, despite the pain in his arm, he taught her how to hold a knife without wasting motion, how to listen for weight shifts in the wind, how to move through underbrush without leaving a trace. Every sound is a story, he said, and you want to be the story they never hear coming. At one point, she stopped, panting. They'll still have more guns than us. Guns can't kill what they can't find. When the wind picked up again and the scent of whiskey and tobacco drifted in with it, Eliza didn't freeze. She crouched low, gripped the knife tighter, and listened. 2 riders, she whispered. One's wheezing, the other's chewing something. Chayton raised an eyebrow. Your ears are getting better. No, she said. I'm just finally listening. Footsteps approached the root cellar entrance. One voice said, We checked down by the ravine. Nothing but prints. Could be wolves. The other replied, Or ghosts. I swear I saw her face in a dream, looking at me like she knew how I'd die. Chayton motioned to Eliza, silent, still. He held a finger to his lips. The footsteps moved on. Eliza exhaled, shaking. We can't keep hiding, she whispered. No, Chayton said. Next time we strike first. We? Unless you're planning to leave. She looked him dead in the eye. Not a chance. For a moment, there was no noise except the crackle of dying flame and the sound of 2 broken things becoming something whole. Eliza didn't just survive the day. She earned it. And tomorrow, she'd begin to turn the hunt. Because every woman sold like cattle holds a fire waiting to burn its way back through flesh, through shame, through silence. And she was almost ready to let it rise. The first man didn't even scream. His throat was already open before his brain realized he was dying. Eliza had waited behind the tree line, heart punching against her ribs, hands slick on the knife Chayton gave her. The rider had dismounted to relieve himself, his pistol unbuckled, his face smug. He never saw her coming. One deep cut across the neck, just like Chayton taught. Fast, clean, necessary. She dropped him without mercy. And when his body hit the dirt, she didn't look away. Chayton emerged from the shadows, quiet as breath, and nodded once. You chose your moment. Eliza wiped the blade on the man's vest. I didn't think, I just did. Good. Thinking is slow. Surviving isn't. They took the man's rifle, ammo, and canteen, then vanished back into the trees. Eliza didn't speak for miles. Her hands trembled, not from guilt, but power. Her whole life, she'd been the one running, hiding, crying. Now, she was the reason someone else didn't go home, and she didn't feel sorry. She felt awake. You still breathing? Chayton asked. Yeah. Then you're still alive. Do you ever feel bad about killing? He paused. I feel bad when I let the wrong ones live. The words sank deep, like ice inside her chest. There were men she wished she could go back in silence, forever. And now, she was getting closer. They made camp that night in a dry gorge, shielded from wind and sky. Chayton's wound was scabbing over, but he moved slower now, his breath heavier. Eliza built the fire without asking. She tore strips from her underskirt to bind his chest, then set traps along the ridge for anyone dumb enough to follow them. You think they'll quit? She asked. No. You think we'll win? Not yet, but they're bleeding now. Every hour we live is an insult they can't wash off. Eliza stared into the fire, the flames reflecting off her eyes like molten glass. I want to be more than saved. You already are. No, she whispered. I want them to regret ever touching me. I want their hands to burn when they remember. Chayton looked at her, the corner of his mouth twitching into something between a grim smile and a warning. Revenge is heavy. You sure you're ready to carry it? I've carried shame. I've carried silence. I'm ready for something that bites back. She stood and picked up the stolen rifle. Show me how to shoot. They trained in silence. First dry firing, then loading, then aiming. She missed twice, then hit a dead pine trunk square through. Again, she said. By the 5th shot, she wasn't missing. By the 10th, Chayton stepped back and nodded. They won't expect this from you. Good. That night, as the fire dimmed and coyotes howled far off, Chayton sat sharpening his blade and muttered, "They think we're still running, aren't we?" "Not anymore. You just changed the story." Eliza leaned back, staring at the stars. She didn't feel safe, but she felt ready. There's a difference. Safe is what little girls wish for. Ready is what women become when the world tries to sell their skin and forget their names. They'd kill again, maybe be killed, but it wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be like last time, because this time, she had a blade, a rifle, and a name no one would strip from her again. Eliza May Turner, not a number, not property. A storm, learning how to roar. The trap was set with silence, blood, and fury. They didn't wait for the riders to find them. They built a message in the dirt instead. Chayton had taught Eliza that some battles weren't won with bullets. Some were won by making the enemy doubt they ever had control. So they left the first man's corpse hanging upside down from a branch, scalped, not to dishonor him, but to send a shiver down the spines of the cowards who sent him. Next to him, Eliza scratched into bark with her knife. "We remember who we are." The posse found it at dusk. Hargrove turned pale. Talcott spat and screamed. "She was a broken little mule a week ago. Now she's killing men like she was born to it." "You underestimated her," Hargrove said flatly. "We both did." That night, Chayton and Eliza watched the enemy from a ridge above. Lanterns flickering below, voices arguing. "They're scared," she whispered. "And angry. That's a good mix." "Good for us," Chayton replied, adjusting the bandage on his arm. "Bad for anyone standing in their way." The next morning, Chayton couldn't move. Fever had set in. His wound burned hot and deep, and even his breath came in short growls. Eliza knelt beside him, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Tell me what to do." "You already know," he croaked. "We prepared. It's your fight now. Not without you. You want to make them pay? You leave me here, take the rifle, set the fire." Her jaw clenched. "I won't leave you. Then you die, and everything we burned for gets buried again." She wanted to scream, wanted to break something, but instead, she kissed his forehead, took the rifle, and stood. "I'll come back, with their blood on my hands." "Make sure it's the right blood," he said. "Don't lose yourself." "I lost myself in chains," she said. "This is me finding what's left." She moved like smoke through the forest, every footstep calculated, breath calm. She didn't wait for the posse to strike. She ambushed their camp before dawn, while most of them still snored with half-drunken grins. Her first bullet went through the leg of the one who laughed loudest at the auction. He screamed. Her second missed, but her third tore through a whiskey jug beside a man's head, spraying glass into his face. Chaos erupted. Guns fired in every direction. Horses panicked. In the smoke and madness, Eliza vanished again, silent, fast, a ghost they had turned loose and now couldn't cage. One man caught her, big, fast, brutal. He pinned her against a tree, snarling. "You think you're something now, little—" Her knife went into his gut. Twice, then a third time for every time she'd been silenced. She left him choking on his own spit. When the sun finally rose, 4 men were dead. 2 wounded. The rest running scared. Talcott stood alone, pistol shaking. Eliza appeared from the edge of the trees, covered in dirt, blood on her hands, smoke behind her. She raised the rifle. "You remember what you called me?" she said, voice raw. "Lot #4. You were property," he spat. "You still are, just borrowed by a red dog." She didn't shoot him. She lowered the rifle. "No, I'm not giving you an easy death." Then she walked away, leaving him alone with his cowardice and the smell of burning shame. When she returned to Chayton, he was half conscious. She laid beside him, bloody hands still trembling, and whispered, "We did it." He opened one eye. "No, you did." That night she didn't sleep. She watched the stars and swore she'd never let the fire inside her go out again. Not for anyone. Not ever. The town called it a scandal. The men called it a disgrace. The women, at least the ones who still remembered what it felt like to be powerless, called it something else. Justice. Word spread fast. A white girl, sold like a mule, had turned into a shadow with a blade. A Lakota warrior bled for her, fought beside her, and taught her not just how to live, but how to reclaim her name. Sheriff Hargrove resigned 2 days later, said nothing, just packed up and rode out before sunrise. Mr. Talcott didn't resign. He drank. Then he disappeared. Some say he wandered into the hills and never came back. Others say Eliza left a warning near his cabin, a blood-marked scarf and a note that read, "Next time, I don't walk away." But Eliza didn't go back to town for revenge. She didn't care about the courthouse, or the saloon gossips, or the cowards who turned their backs when she was screaming in chains. She went back for something they couldn't steal. Her mother's grave. It sat behind the old church, half swallowed by weeds. The name May Turner barely readable through the cracked stone. Eliza knelt, fingers brushing the soil, and whispered, "I made it out. Not clean, not whole, but alive." She pressed her forehead to the ground. "And I made them bleed." She stayed for an hour, then left without a word. No goodbyes, no forgiveness, just truth. The next weeks were blur. Chayton recovered slow. The fever came and went like a ghost, and every time he woke, Eliza was there, feeding him herbs, changing bandages, standing watch. He once tried to tell her to run, to leave him behind again. She didn't answer, just leaned closer and whispered, "I'm done running." They never said the word love, not once, not because it wasn't there, but because love, real love, wasn't something they needed to name. It was in the way she steadied his hand when he couldn't hold the flint. It was in the way he gave her the last of the smoked meat before he touched any. It was in the silence between them that didn't ache anymore. Eventually, Chayton stood without help, walked again, and one morning, as dawn cut through the trees like silver arrows, he turned to her and asked, "What now?" Eliza smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Now, we ride." "Where?" "To the women they haven't taken yet, to the girls still waiting for someone to show up." He blinked. "You want to fight for them all?" "No," she said, slinging the rifle over her shoulder. "I want to teach them to fight for themselves." And so began the stories. Tales whispered across plains and canyons, about a woman with fire in her voice and a warrior who walked beside her like a storm on 2 feet, about villages that stopped selling daughters, about slavers who disappeared in the night, about a name that no longer meant ownership, but resistance. Eliza May Turner, not a victim, not a wife, not a prize, a reckoning. And wherever she rode, men remembered her eyes, not because they were beautiful, but because they held the reflection of everything they were afraid of. Truth, memory, rage that couldn't be sold or silenced. She had once stood on a platform, rope on her wrists, priced like a goat. Now she stood with blades in her hands and a nation behind her. And for the first time, the world looked at her and knew. She was the one thing they couldn't chain again. They rode side by side through land that once swallowed them whole. Now they owned every mile of it, not with paper, not with gold, but with memory and fire. Eliza had changed. She no longer walked like prey. Her spine held storms. Her eyes, once hollow, now sparked when she spoke. Towns whispered before she arrived. "Is it her?" they'd say. "The auction girl, the one who carved her freedom into the dirt." They never knew how to greet her. As a criminal, a warrior, a ghost come to shame the living. She didn't care. She didn't come for praise. She came for answers. For daughters hidden behind curtains, for women locked behind silence, for the little girls being trained to smile while their souls rot. Chayton stood at her side always, not as a savior, not as a shield, but as a mirror. He never told her what to do. He only reminded her what she was capable of. Together they became stories carved into the bones of those who had forgotten how to listen. In one town, they stopped a wagon train loaded with 3 girls wrapped in canvas like meat. The men who drove it didn't raise their hands fast enough. 2 fell before they begged. The 3rd lived long enough to drop his gun and cry. "Please, I didn't know." Eliza aimed calmly. "That we remember?" She didn't fire. She turned her back and left him alive with the truth burning in his gut. In another place, she taught a group of Apache women how to make bone knives from deer ribs. "You don't need steel to be sharp," she told them. "You just need to know your worth." And they did. Word of her spread like thunder before a summer storm. Some called her a rebel, others called her cursed. But to the broken, to the used, to the girls with cracked lips and bruised skin, she was a signal fire, a walking reminder that survival wasn't enough, that some women aren't rescued, they rise. One day, Chayton found her standing by a canyon edge, staring into the wind. "You still carry it?" he asked. She didn't turn. "Every day. You don't have to anymore." "I know," she said, "but I choose to." He stepped beside her, eyes scanning the vastness. "Do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" Eliza thought long and hard. "I wish they had never broken me, but I don't wish away what I became after." She looked at him. "Pain made me wake up. Fire made me move." He nodded slowly. "Then keep burning." That night, as the stars scattered like sparks across the black, she sat by the fire and took out a piece of cloth. From it, she unfolded the same rope that once bound her wrists at the auction block. Now it was clean, decorated with beads and symbols stitched in red. She tied it around her arm, not as a shackle, but as armor, as memory, as a warning. And then she whispered to the flames, "I see you, girl, the one still in the dark. I'm coming." Because she wasn't just one story. She was 100 unfinished ones, still waiting to scream. And now they had a voice. They had teeth. They had her. So let the towns call her what they wanted. Let the cowards hide. Let the old ways crumble. She had no interest in forgiveness, only in fire. And as long as her boots touched this earth, no one would ever put a price tag on a girl again without tasting the storm that rode beside her name. Eliza May Turner, freedom made flesh, rage made righteous, and never ever for sale again.